Hello and welcome to News 9. I'm Verghese Abraham. First up, let's take a look at what's happening on the latest at the Israel-Hamas war. Today marks day 26 since Israel suffered potentially one of its worst attacks in its brief history as a nation. Here's the latest update from that war front. Israeli airstrikes have killed dozens in the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza. The attempt on this camp has been for some time to flush out the militants who could be hiding inside this camp. Israeli airstrikes have been targeting Jabalia as well as surrounding refugee camps as well. This is to ensure that militants don't in fact hide in that particular location. Meanwhile, bombing has sparked outrage in the Arab world. Many of the Arab leaders have in fact expressed their concerns of the continuous targeting of refugee camps in this war. Meanwhile, bombing has also sparked a complete kind of an outrage from the Arab world, and they have in fact hinted that strong action will be taken. Meanwhile, Israel accepts the attack, says the target was a high-ranking Hamas commander who was hiding in the refugee camp, and therefore they had to go ahead with the attack on the refugee camp, is what we understand. Meanwhile, there are reports coming in that the Israeli forces have made gains in the ongoing ground invasion in Gaza. This is what Israel has in fact said. It has said that it is making steady progress when it comes to the land invasion in Gaza. Meanwhile, the death toll keeps climbing up. At least 8,525 Palestinians, including 3,542 children, have been killed in the latest attack. Antony Blinken will be visiting Israel on Friday and will be having a talk with the top Israeli leadership. However, the war is escalating with another proxy group of Iran, the Houthis, launching a ballistic missile as well as drones towards Israel. Houthis are the Shia-backed militia group in Yemen, and they have said that they have launched ballistic missiles, drones against Israel in support of Hamas. An Israeli airstrike has killed dozens of people in the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza. Gaza's health minister has reported that the strike resulted in 50 deaths with 150 people injured. Israel has acknowledged that the attack was carried by it and stated that the target was a high-ranking Hamas commander whom they were able to eliminate. They claim to have neutralized a large number of terrorists from Hamas's central Jabalia battalion who were with the commander at that time. The bombing has sparked outrage in the Arab world, and several humanitarian organizations have also condemned the strikes on the refugee camp. Israel has entered the second phase of the war with the intention of eliminating Hamas. Israeli tanks and troops continue to advance towards northern Gaza. Meanwhile, Gaza's health ministry has reported that more than 8,500 people have been killed in the territory since October 7th. Gaza is running dangerously low on food and supplies as well as water. Medicines is also a big concern as 2.2 million residents get squeezed in a narrow strip of land. Meanwhile, the Israeli Defense Forces say that 2 soldiers were also killed and another 2 were seriously wounded during clashes with the Hamas terrorists in the Gaza Strip. The slain soldiers were identified as Staff Sergeant Roy Wolf from Ramat Gan and Staff Sergeant Lavi Lifitz from Modin, who both served in the Givati Infantry Brigade's reconnaissance unit. This is the story that we are tracking right now. What we understand is that 2 Israeli soldiers have been killed when it comes to the operations that is being carried out in Gaza. What we understand is that the Israeli Defense Forces says 2 soldiers who were engaged in the operations in Gaza were killed.
כוחותינו נלחמים כעת בעומק רצועת עזה. מחסלים מחבלים בהתקלויות מטווח קצר תוקפים מטרות בתקיפות משולבות מהיבשה, מהאוויר ומהים. בשעות אחר הצהריים, כוחות חי"ר ושריון השתלטו על מעוז מרכזי של חמאס במערב העיר ג'באליה. מעוז זה שימש לאימונים לפעולת הטרור שאליה יצאו המחבלים לטבח, ומעבר למרחב החוף ממנו יצאו מחבלים נוספים לטבח ב-7 באוקטובר. במהלך הקרבות חוסלו מחבלים רבים והושמדו תשתיות טרור. זו לחימה מורכבת, חלקה היא גם פנים אל פנים. בקרבות איבדנו לוחמים. הלוחמים שלנו בשעה הזאת נלחמים בשדה הקרב. הם נלחמים באומץ ובגבורה. יש גם קרבות עזים שבהם מחסלים מחבלים, מנהלים קרבות פנים אל פנים וחותרים אל מגע. הלחימה הזאת היא גם לחימה מסוכנת, צריך להבין את זה. יש לזה מחירים, זה מורכב, אך היא הכרחית ביכולת שלנו להשיג את מטרות המלחמה. הבוקר, באילת, במרחב הדרומי, מערכות צה"ל זיהו מטרה אווירית שמתקרבת לכיוון שטח מדינת ישראל, ופעלו התראות, אין איום ולא נשקפת סכנה. אני חוזר, אין איום במרחב הזה ולא נשקפת סכנה. עד כה נמסרה הודעה למשפחותיהם של 240 חטופים. עד כה נמסרה הודעה למשפחותיהם של 315 חללי צה"ל. אנחנו מחבקים את המשפחות, חיבוק חם, ודואגים ללוותן לאורך כל הדרך.
On Tuesday, at least 3 rockets were fired from Gaza into Israel. Israel reported that its forces engaged with Hamas gunmen with the extensive tunnel network between Gaza. Meanwhile, a hospital director in Gaza stated that over 50 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli airstrike on the refugee camp in Jabalia, with 150 more wounded. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected international calls to cease the fighting. There has been no immediate comment from the Israeli military regarding this incident. Well, the fighting in Gaza is bearing similarities to the operations in Iraq, where US-backed Iraqi forces flushed Islamic State fighters out of a tunnel network in 2014. But in Gaza, Israeli forces face more formidable infrastructure and more challenging geography. Hamas's tunnel system is more advanced and its fighters are better trained, more disciplined and better equipped. So the challenge for the IDF is high, but they are in fact going through the difficult task of clearing one tunnel after the other.
Gaza is Hamas's power base, and the huge tunnel network underneath Gaza is a secret power base within that base. It is Hamas's default go-to place to hide, to conceal hostages, to fire rockets from, to store weapons. So that is why the network is so important to Israel. First of all, it has destroyed a lot of the ground cover above land so that the Hamas fighters do not have anywhere to go if they run. Now, the Israeli troops are moving underground in order to free the hostages, kill or capture the Hamas fighters, and deter or stop them from ever doing this sort of thing again. I've been down some of these tunnels in Gaza. The smaller commercial ones are about 3 to 4 feet wide. The military tunnels are much more sophisticated, concrete reinforced, far deeper. It's going to be very, very, very hard for Israel to flush Hamas fighters out of that network. Hamas launching an attack on October 7th into Israeli kibbutzes and towns was unprecedented. It has shocked and galvanized Israel into a retaliation far bigger than anything we've ever seen before. Many of Gaza's 2.3 million population are now without homes, so there is a humanitarian crisis brewing in Gaza, but Israel is determined not to let material into Gaza that Hamas could use to redouble its assault and attacks on Israeli forces.
Well, the Israeli army released a new video on Tuesday, which they claim shows soldiers in the Gaza Strip. According to a statement from the Israeli army, their ground troops targeted Hamas outposts in northern part of Gaza Strip. This operation aimed at striking anti-tank missile launching cells and posts. Israel is focusing on the tunnels between the densely populated Gaza enclave as a key objective during its ongoing ground offensive. This offensive was launched in retaliation for a surprise attack by the Islamist group Hamas into the southern Israeli region on October 7th. This, in fact, followed almost 3 weeks of relentless bombardment, most of them trying to take out the rocket launch sites and with a renewed focus on destroying the tunnels that the Hamas has created. Well, Israeli forces supported by armored vehicles were observed operating in southern Israel. This happened just 4 days after the commencement of the significant ground offensive in the Gaza Strip. Israel reported that its forces engaged with Hamas gunmen with the extensive tunnel network beneath Gaza. They aimed to free hostages and advance their campaign to eliminate the militant group. Israeli forces targeted Gaza's main north-south road and launched attacks on Gaza City from 2 different directions. IDF spokesperson Jonathan Connickers has in fact spoken about extensively on the operations that is being carried out in the Gaza region. Let's listen in.
Wherever you're watching, it is 6:40 a.m. October 31st. We are on the 25th day of the fighting of the war. I am Lieutenant Colonel in the reserves Jonathan, and I want to give you a daily update. A few topics. We're going to have a small piece of good news about the release of an Israeli hostage who is now safe with her family. We'll be speaking about the current situation on the ground in northern Gaza. We'll speak about tunnels and specifically compounds under hospitals that Hamas has prepared in Gaza. And then we will go north and speak about what Hezbollah is doing, how we are defending ourselves, and what this means for the region. Stay with us. Let's begin with some positive news. It doesn't happen a lot that we have positive news, but I am happy to say that Private Ori Megidish is now back home with her family. She was rescued in a special operation done by Israeli security forces, IDF and ISA, Shabak, who went into Gaza, got her out based on intelligence and on a lot of resources that were allocated towards this. She is now home with her family. She is well, both mentally and physically. She has provided intelligence that we'll be able to use in the future for future operations. And the only thing that I can say that won't jeopardize operational security is that we are committed and determined to get all of the 238 Israeli hostages that are still inside Gaza. Let's speak about the Southern Command and the situation on the ground. The commandos that you can see, this is the General in command of the Southern Command, General Finkelman, and he is leading the troops from the front. That is how Israeli commanders lead. Some of these pictures were taken, some of the footage was taken from inside Gaza. Our troops are now on the ground. We are expanding our activity in Gaza. We've conducted a few raids over the last days. We've expanded those now, and Israeli troops are in various parts of northern Gaza operating. We have entered, and as you can see here on this clip, which is from a few days, heavily armored vehicles, tanks, APCs, bulldozers entering into the Gaza Strip, moving slowly, meticulously, with a lot of firepower to support, with lots of intelligence, and looking for Hamas and engaging with Hamas combatants, attacking them on the ground and also from the air, using many of the resources that we have available for us. Some other visuals that you can see: tanks and APCs equipped with special engineering construction to face the threats that we know that they're going to face inside the densely populated urban terrain, and the columns that are advancing, and the various developments that we see inside. The situation on the ground is that we continue to strike Hamas. We are striking in all parts of the Gaza Strip. We have said before that we will continue to strike. We will focus our activities on the northern part of Gaza. That is the center of gravity of Hamas, and that is where we are attacking now. But we continue to strike in other parts of Gaza. We are hunting their commanders, we are attacking their infrastructure, and whenever there is an important target that is related to Hamas, we strike it. Now we do so with professionalism. Hamas is the enemy, not the civilian population, and we focus our military efforts on Hamas to make sure that civilians, or to minimize the risk for civilians. 2 weeks ago, we called for the evacuation of civilians towards the south. We have added to that a humanitarian zone in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, just northwest of Khan Yunis, here called Muassi, and we hope that civilians will go there. Happy to see that more than 800,000 Palestinians have evacuated from the northern part, from the main combat area where there's most of fighting. Hamas has stopped many of them from doing so, but many have, and hopefully all of them will evacuate for a concern for their own safety. And humanitarian assistance continues to be delivered through the Rafah corridor into Gaza, into the southern point. There's also more access to water, there is food, and as days go by, I think we will be ramping up the facilitation of humanitarian assistance to the Gaza Strip. We do understand that the situation there is difficult, but this is not of our doing, and it isn't what we wanted. Please remember, we are 25 days into the fighting. We didn't start this, we didn't want it, but we are definitely going to end it, and it will end with a totally dismantled Hamas in a totally different security situation in the south. Let's speak about the Shifa hospital. For those of you who haven't seen this, this is an aerial view of Shifa, the most important and the largest hospital in Gaza. Hamas is using this infrastructure like many other protected facilities in Gaza, hospitals, clinics, schools, mosques, UN facilities, and we have shown footage of rocket fire between mosques and UN schools, and we have shown how Hamas uses the proximity of civilians. This perhaps is the most cynic and the worst use that they have done of these protected assets. This is an illustration, 3D, of what's above ground and below ground. Storage of weapons, command and control facilities, offices and places for terrorists to hide. This is all underneath the hospital. This is a violation of international law. This is despicable, and it puts the people that are being treated in the hospital at risk. It should be condemned and it should be stopped before it's too late. And that's the situation in Gaza. Operations continue. We continue to strike from the air, and our troops are on the ground enhancing the activities that we are conducting. Let's quickly move to the north and speak about what Hezbollah is attempting to do and how we are defending ourselves against Hezbollah. Up in the north, Hezbollah has been attacking across the border. Up until now, they have fired rockets. They have tried to infiltrate. They have fired dozens of anti-tank missiles at our civilians and at our military position. They have fired rockets at our positions in Mount Dov, and they have fired at our communities. Many things have been done by Hezbollah. We are defending ourselves against this aggression. We have been targeting, and these are the two senior commanders, of course, Lieutenant General Halevi, our Chief of Staff, and the General in charge of the Northern Command, Major General Gordon. They are on the ground monitoring the troops and making sure that the troops have the proper guidance. And I want to show you some results of what our troops have been doing in retaliation to Hezbollah attacks. These are strikes done, and you can see maybe a bit graphic image here, but I think this is part of what we're doing. Strikes conducted by our commando units that are using precise intelligence and precise delivery of weapons against Hezbollah operatives. Up until now, Hezbollah has quite a lot of casualties. Unfortunately, we have casualties as well. But at the end of the day, what's important here is for the state of Lebanon to understand that they stand to lose almost everything and gain absolutely nothing by allowing Hezbollah to drag them into a war. And if anybody cares about the state of Lebanon, they should be out of this war, because they will gain nothing from helping a bunch of terrorists in Gaza. That is the situation. We continue to be deployed, strong and vigilant along our borders. We are definitely not going to allow Hezbollah to escalate and enhance their attacks against us. We are defending against that, and we will continue to operate in Gaza and defend ourselves on all of our other fronts. Rockets that were fired from Syria and all kinds of reports of aerial threats that we had in the south in Eilat. I hope you stay connected and that you stay informed. Please follow our tweets, our updates, our posts on Facebook, and all of the other accounts that I know that by now you are familiar with. We work hard in order to deliver timely, verified, and honest information so that you can be aware of the situation on the ground. I hope you find this useful, and I wish you all the best. Shalom.
Meanwhile, Israel has released a footage of the bombed house of a top Hamas official in the West Bank during the Gaza war. Saleh al-Arori, who is the Hamas deputy leader, was not there at the time of the attack. Israeli forces took over the house earlier, using it as an intelligence center. The attack was symbolic, targeting al-Arori, a key figure behind previous attacks on Israel. Additionally, an Israeli forces confirmed the killing of Nassim Abu Ajina on social media platform X. In Israel's long war on Hamas, IDF was likely need to engage in urban warfare in Gaza, but urban warfare has often proved to be bloody and exacting in nature. Military operations in urban terrain is the hardest type of warfare that any nation can ask for the military to conduct. Casualties tend to go 3 to 6 times greater in city streets than in open landscapes. Let's take a look at the current situation in Gaza. What we understand is that when it comes to the urban warfare situation, it is turning out to be that more than 8,000 people have been killed and over 3,000 children have also been killed. 1/10 of Gaza has been destroyed. 280,000 have been rendered homeless. 0.3% of the population of Gaza has been killed. Meanwhile, America and its allies, alongside Iraqi soldiers, conducted urban warfare in Mosul in Iraq in 2016 to 17 to weed away ISIS. It was deadly exercise and incurred heavy loss of lives and destruction of property. Now, let us take a look at how the battle for Mosul was. The bitter urban warfare in the Iraqi town in 2016 to 17, 9,000 lives were lost and almost 0.6% of the city's population. Most residential buildings damaged during that war. 900,000 civilians had fled the city. Now, this is kind of a similar kind of a situation that we see when it comes to Gaza. The situation is as similar as that in Mosul. But Gaza is densely populated, and urban warfare in Gaza will be very challenging because of the number of reasons. So what are the problems for an urban warfare in Gaza? Geography is less permissive for escape. Egypt is not opening its borders to refugees. Israel had ordered Gazans to leave North Gaza before the attack, and half of North Gaza's 1.1 million population didn't leave. Israel is also striking parts of South Gaza. Urban warfare in Gaza is self-contained within the enclave. And of course, the most important part of it is that Gaza's healthcare system has crippled due to the attacks. Israel is not keen on sending civilian aid to Gaza Meanwhile, urban warfare in Gaza is likely to be bloodier and deadlier than the one in Mosul. Why Gaza can be bloodier than Mosul? Well, we tell you this. ISIS held Mosul for only 2 years. Hamas is deeply embedded in Gaza. Hamas's defenses built under civil infrastructure. That is another big issue. Israel's offensive in Gaza intensive, with around 6,000 bombs being dropped in a week. US and allies had dropped almost 7,000 bombs in Mosul over 2 months. IDF has little affinity with the Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Liberation forces in Iraq wanted to free the co-patriots from ISIS. Mosul hospitals are struck after long periods of warnings. Israel is striking hospitals in Gaza that Hamas used as a base. In Mosul, civilians hated ISIS and helped liberation forces. Meanwhile, Israel can only rely on electronic intelligence in Gaza, as the local population is in support of Hamas. Hamas has an intelligence advantage on the ground in Gaza. Israel will bank on dynamic targeting, likely to cause huge loss of lives if this kind of a strategy is deployed. Meanwhile, Yemen's Houthi militia has claimed an attempted attack on southern Israel, saying it had launched a large batch of ballistic and cruise missiles as well as drones towards Israeli targets. Meanwhile, Yemen's Houthi rebels have in fact upped the game. They are saying that they have gone ahead and launched ballistic missiles towards Israel. Drones have also been launched. The Arrow system has in fact brought down some of those missiles as well. But however, the Houthis are being backed by Iran again in the civil war in Yemen have said that they have entered the war against Israel based on the issue of trying to support the Hamas. Now, Israel has said that it has got a robust security system in place and will take down the Houthi rebels. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the hostage video released by terror group Hamas on 30th October 2023. Netanyahu called the video as quote-unquote cruel psychological propaganda. Israel said its forces freed a soldier from Hamas captivity during the ground offensive in Gaza.
Israel's Prime Minister condemned a video that Hamas had released on Monday that shows 3 female hostages seized by the Islamist movement on October 7th. In the video, which is being watched on this phone, one of the hostages criticizes Benjamin Netanyahu for failing to protect Israeli citizens during the deadly attack and failing to get them back home. She purportedly calls for a deal to secure their release in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Netanyahu, in a statement, condemned the clip from Hamas as cruel propaganda. Israel's leader is coming under pressure over his handling of the crisis. Dozens of people attended a protest in Tel Aviv to call for the hostages' release. Shiri Grossbard is a close friend of one of the hostages, Yelena Tripanov.
I'm not a political person. I'm not the one with the answers, but I do know this. No other country in the world would have 239 of their people being kept hostage and not do anything about it. No politics, just bring them home now. 24 days is way too long for these people to be kept in captivity.
According to Israeli authorities, at least 239 hostages were taken captive by Hamas gunmen during the October 7th attack, which killed at least 1,400 people. The presence of the hostages in Gaza has complicated Israel forces' ground operation in the enclave, but Netanyahu has rejected calls for a ceasefire. Gaza health authorities say more than 8,300 people, many of them children, have been killed in Israeli attacks since Hamas' assault.
The ground action actually creates the possibility, not the certainty, but the possibility of getting our hostages out, because Hamas will not do it unless they're under pressure. They simply will not do it.
On Monday, Israel said its forces had freed their first hostage during its Gaza ground offensive, a female soldier who Hamas captured in its October 7th raid. Israel's security agency released a photo of the soldier, Ori Megadish, surrounded by family members after her rescue. In her hometown of Kiryat Gat, residents cheered after news of her release. Since the October 7th attack, Hamas has released 4 hostages through back-channel efforts coordinated by Qatar.
Meanwhile, anti-Semitic incidents have spiked worldwide following the Hamas attack on Israel. Verbal abuse, online threats and physical assaults against Jews rose significantly in the United States, UK, France, Germany and South Africa. Anger over Palestinian casualties in the conflict often leads to aggression against Jews, creating fears of random attacks and prompting increased security measures. It is being said that the continuing Israel-Hamas war has resulted in rising hatred against Jews. It is being said that anger led by Palestinian deaths is creating fear amongst Jews. There have been reports of anti-Semitic hate being witnessed in UK, Germany and in other European states as well. Meanwhile, in the United States, Muslim and Arab American groups are pressurizing President Joe Biden to secure a Gaza ceasefire. The National Muslim Democratic Council, representing key states like Michigan, Ohio and Pennsylvania, demanded Biden broker a ceasefire, threatening to withhold support and votes in 2024 otherwise. Now, they criticized Biden's support for Israel during the conflict, urging him to end the violence. Biden met with Muslim leaders but faces growing discontent with Arab and Muslim American communities regarding his stance on Israel's actions in Gaza. Meanwhile, the WHO is saying that a public health catastrophe is imminent in Gaza. This is what it is saying, that it is because of the overcrowding, mass displacement and damage to infrastructure that could lead to this public health disaster.
These cannot happen without anesthesia. In fact, they do happen without anesthesia. It's an imminent public health catastrophe that looms with the mass displacement, the overcrowding, the damage to water and sanitation infrastructure.
The numbers are appalling. Reportedly now more than 3,450 children have been killed. Staggeringly, this number rises significantly every single day. Gaza has become a graveyard for children. More than 1 million children of Gaza have a critical water crisis. Gaza's water production now, its capacity is at 5% of its daily output. So child deaths to dehydration, particularly infant deaths to dehydration, are a growing threat.
The latest number we have is that nearly 672,000 people are sheltering in 150 UNRWA facilities, mainly schools, but also other facilities. That means that the average number of internally displaced in these shelters, which are prepared to be built to also be shelters, is over 3 times their intended capacity. So they are wildly overcrowded.
Well, another incident of violence has been reported from the conflict-ridden state of Manipur. A sub-divisional police officer named Chingtam Anand was shot dead by suspected tribal militants at More in Manipur's Tenugopal district. Police authorities informed that Anand received a severe bullet injury after a group of insurgents fired upon a group of policemen who at that time were inspecting the newly constructed helipad in More. More is a border town which is dominated by people belonging to the Kuki-Zo community. The injured SDPO was taken to a primary health care center in More where he later succumbed to his injuries. The police have launched an operation in the area to apprehend the insurgents. Chief Minister N. Biren Singh took to platform X and said that he has been deeply saddened by the cold-blooded killing of the SDPO Chingtam Anand. He also vowed that the perpetrators shall be brought to justice. Also, the CM has ordered a joint operation with central forces to investigate the case. The incident comes weeks after several civil society organizations, particularly those based in More, demanded the removal of state forces from the border town. Meanwhile, the Maratha agitation continues to boil over. Traffic on the Pune-Bengaluru highway in Pune's Navalgate Bridge area was blocked on Tuesday, 31st October, as a large number of protesters staged an agitation over the demand for Maratha reservation and burned several tires. Following which, the Maharashtra government published an order asking officials concerning to issue fresh Kundi caste certificates to eligible Maratha community members, paving the way for them to avail reservation benefits under the OBC category. Meanwhile, MP Sanjay Raut has said that the party MPs and MLAs have not been invited to all-party meeting called by the Maharashtra government on the Maratha reservation. Only Amdas Danve, leader of the opposition in Maharashtra Legislative Council, called the meeting by the state government, according to MP Sanjay Raut. On Monday, 30th of October, the protests over reservation for the Maratha community turned violent in various parts of the state's Marathwada region, with protesters resorting to arson and vandalism, targeting the houses of 2 Nationalist Congress Party MLAs and a municipal building in Bede. Agitators also vandalized the office of BJP MLA in Chhattar Pradesh Sambhajinagar district and damaged several state-owned buses as road blockades were held in various parts of Marathwada. Well, that's all in this edition of the Bulletin. Stay tuned to News9 for further news updates.
Literally every major power in the world is gearing up with its own digital currency. And so is India. But India's UPI has taken digital transactions to the next level. So, with UPI already available, what exactly is the use case for the e-rupee?
This and more streaming on world's first news OTT. News9 Plus, download now.
With all this gear, you must be wondering if I'm climbing a mountain.